Hello from Mindset Daily, wishing you a day full of health, peace, and happiness. Thank you for watching the Mindset Daily channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support us. Thank you so much.
What if protecting your peace means walking away from the people closest to you? Have you ever wondered why you feel drained, even when you're doing everything right? The truth is, not everyone in your life deserves a front row seat to your journey. Let me share something that most people are too afraid to say out loud. You don't owe everyone access to your life. For too long, we've walked around carrying the weight of unrealistic expectations, believing it's our duty to be available, agreeable, and endlessly giving. We answer every call, show up for everyone, even when those same people stopped showing up for us a long time ago. But today, I want to speak to something deeper, your soul. You have to stop giving keys to people who repeatedly shatter your peace. Every person you welcome into your space leaves an imprint on your spirit. And the truth is, some of us aren't exhausted because of how much we do, but because of who we're doing it around. We're surrounded by voices that don't align with God's purpose for us. There comes a point when you have to face reality and ask the hard question, are they helping you grow or holding you back? Not everyone in your life is there out of love. Some are simply drawn to your light, your energy, your warmth, because they want to consume it. You know the ones I'm talking about. The people who only call when they need something. The ones who vanish the moment you need support. The ones who cheer quietly when you fail and fall silent when you succeed. Still, we let them stay. We cling to the past and whisper excuses like, they've been in my life for so long. But let's be honest, longevity doesn't equal loyalty. Some relationships have already expired, yet we keep trying to microwave what's rotten and pretend it's still fresh. Ask yourself, what are you losing by keeping them around? Is it your focus? Your peace of mind? Your sense of worth? Many of us pray for peace while dancing with chaos. We ask God to heal us, yet refuse to release the very people who are wounding us. But healing cannot take place in the same environment that broke you. And that means, yes, it's time for some difficult decisions. It might feel like rejection. It might even feel like you're being unkind. But growth? Growth often begins where comfort ends. But there's nothing heartless about choosing peace over poison. There's nothing wrong with protecting your sanity, even if it means stepping away from those who don't understand your worth. When Jesus walked this earth, he didn't waste energy trying to convince anyone of his value. He didn't explain himself to doubters or chase after those who turn away. He stayed focused, anchored in purpose, undistracted by opinions. And so must you. The people who are truly meant for your journey will never ask you to shrink, to bend, or to carry the weight of constantly proving yourself. They'll see your growth and honor it. They'll respect your silence, support your boundaries, and celebrate your evolution. Because here's the truth, access is sacred. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table. Think about it. You wouldn't let a stranger walk into your home uninvited. So why do we allow strangers, or even familiar faces with harmful intentions, to stroll freely through our minds, our hearts, our spirits? Your space is holy ground. Guard it like it matters, because it does. This life isn't about gaining likes or fitting in. It's a purpose-driven path, carved out uniquely for you. But if you're constantly surrounded by people who distract, discourage, or deplete you, how can you ever step into the fullness of who God created you to be? Many of us have let emotional clutter pile up so high that we've silenced the voice that matters most. God has been speaking clearly, consistently, but the line is clogged. It's crowded with noise from people who were never meant to have that kind of access to you in the first place. And maybe, just maybe, this season is about divine disconnection. Maybe God is inviting you into intentional silence, not out of bitterness, but out of obedience. Maybe he's calling you to ghost certain voices, not because you're angry, but because he is preparing to do something sacred in your life, and it requires your full attention. It takes clarity. It takes separation. And no, you're not being rude. You're being real. You're not being selfish. You're being strategic. When the access someone has to your life starts costing you your peace, your purpose, or your joy, it's simply too expensive. So what do? You shut the door. You block the number. You silence the noise that's been draining your soul. And here's the key. Don't apologize for it. You've carried more than your share for far too long. You've said yes out of obligation while your soul whispered no. You've tolerated what God had already told you to release. But now is different. Now is your time. It's time to ghost everyone who no longer aligns with where you're headed. Let them wonder why. Let them gossip. Let them make their assumptions. You don't owe anyone access. You don't owe them explanations. And you certainly don't owe them an apology. There's a time to speak, but there's also a time to be silent. And too many of us have wasted our breath trying to explain ourselves to people who never intended to understand us in the first place. So hear this from the depths of my heart. Silence is not surrender. It's not weakness. It's strategy. It's strength. It's a quiet declaration that you're not playing small anymore. You're not playing their game. You don't need to respond to every insult or defend your name in every conversation. Because when people talk behind your back, when they twist your words or question your motives, the world might expect you to react. To post a reply, to justify yourself, to fight back. But you don't work for the world. You walk with God. And when you walk with Him, something powerful happens. You begin to realize not every battle is yours to fight. Some conflicts are too small for the weight of your calling. Some drama is too petty for the size of your purpose. So don't confuse silence with defeat. Often, silence is your greatest defense, your boldest move. When you stop responding to drama, when you no longer feel the need to explain yourself to doubters, and when you finally quit chasing validation from people who never valued your worth, you're sending a powerful message. You're declaring, I know exactly who I am, and I know who walks beside me. The truth is, the enemy thrives in noise. He feeds on confusion, division, and arguments that spiral with no end. He loves to stir the chaos, to keep you emotionally entangled in things that steal your peace. But God whispers in stillness. He leads through quiet clarity. He moves where there's peace, not panic. And that's why silence isn't weakness. Sometimes, silence becomes your strongest weapon in a spiritual battle. It denies the enemy the reaction he's hungry for. It slams the door on pointless debates. And most importantly, it clears the space for God to speak directly to your heart. Some of you are exhausted, not from lack of effort, but because you've been carrying the burden of needing to be understood. You've poured energy into defending your intentions, explaining your actions, and trying to fix relationships that God already told you to release. But hear this clearly. Peace doesn't come from being understood by people. It comes from knowing that God understands you completely. He sees what others can't. He knows your motives, your heart, and your journey. Jesus himself stood silent before those who accused him. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. He didn't scramble to change their minds. Why? Because his purpose wasn't dependent on their approval, and neither is yours. Not everyone will get the path you're walking. They're still stuck in patterns you've already broken free from. So when you begin choosing stillness over noise, purpose over performance, peace over popularity, don't be surprised if they say you've changed. Because you have. And thank God for that. You're no longer trying to go back. You're moving forward one peaceful, purposeful step at a time. I believe some of you are walking through a season where God is calling you into silence. Not because you're losing, not because you've done something wrong, but because he's preparing your victory in the stillness. Sometimes, silence is not the absence of progress. It's the proving ground. It's where your faith is stretched, your strength is restored, and your perspective becomes sharp. In the silence, God starts building something in you that won't be shaken by the noise of the world. You might feel isolated in this quiet chapter. You might even question whether you've been forgotten. But let me remind you, God does his most powerful work in the dark. Just like seeds don't sprout in the spotlight, but deep underground, in the hidden and the unseen. That's where transformation begins. And when the time is right, what God has planted within you will emerge. Not because you shouted to be seen, but because your roots held firm beneath the surface. You don't have to get louder to be stronger. You just need to be still. You don't need to prove your value to anyone. You need to protect the peace that God has given you. And yes, sometimes it means ghosting the noise. Turning down the volume on arguments, chaos, and constant distractions. Not because you're running away, but because you're rising up. You've come to realize that peace doesn't live in having the last word. It lives in knowing that God always has the final say. So the next time someone tries to drag you into drama, the next time you're tempted to respond just to defend your character, take a breath. Ask yourself honestly, does this deserve your peace? Is this the battle you're meant to fight? Or is God simply asking you to be still so he can speak on your behalf in ways words never could? Let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them get it wrong. You stay focused. Stay grounded. Stay silent. Not because you're afraid, but because your faith speaks louder. And here's a truth many avoid. Growth requires separation. You can't keep doing the same things with the same people in the same places and expect transformation. At some point, you have to take a bold step away from what feels familiar, from what's easy, from what's safe, even for what's popular, because the path God is calling you to walk won't always be paved with comfort. Sometimes, you'll have to walk into the unknown with nothing but faith in your heart and obedience in your hands. And let's be honest, that kind of leap is never easy. We're built for connection. We cherish our circles. We cling to shared history. And because of that, we often mistake closeness for calling. We convince ourselves that just because someone has walked beside us, they're meant to walk with us forever. But the truth is, not everyone in your life is meant for your whole journey. Some were only meant for a chapter. Some people were essential to your survival, but they were never meant to be part of your success story. They were there for the storm, but not for the harvest. Sometimes the hardest transitions come when God starts pruning your life. He begins to cut away what no longer serves your next season. People, habits, even certain opportunities. And yes, that pruning hurts. It feels like loss. It feels like something is being taken from you. But in reality, it's not punishment. It's preparation. God is creating space. He's lifting burdens. He's removing what's been quietly holding you back so you can step forward freely. Because not everyone can carry what God has entrusted to you. Not everyone is equipped to support what's growing inside you. That's why the crowd gets smaller as your calling gets louder. That's why the closer you get to purpose, the more you realize not everyone can come. Just look at Abraham. When God called him, there was no detailed itinerary, no map, no GPS coordinates. Just a command. Leave your country, your people, your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. That's not just faith, that's radical trust. That's what real separation looks like. That's how legacy begins, with one bold decision to step away from comfort and start walking toward your God-given destiny. And some of you, deep down, already know this. You've been hearing that call, maybe not in words, but in the restlessness you feel, the quiet stirring in your spirit. God has been prompting you, nudging you to shift your habits, to let go of certain patterns, to stop returning to the places and conversations that no longer feed your growth. And yet, you're resisting it. Not because you lack faith, but because separation feels a lot like abandonment. You're scared of what life looks like without certain people, afraid of the silence that might follow. You're afraid of being misunderstood. But hear this, you are never truly alone when you are walking in step with God. And sometimes, the loneliness you're feeling is not a sign that you've been left behind. It's a sign that you're being lifted up. God is setting you apart so he can set you above. And yes, the process may feel like loss. Friends start to fade. Invitations stop coming. Familiar faces go quiet. But that's not rejection, it's refinement. That's God trimming the excess, clearing the runway for the next launch in your life. He's not being harsh. He's being strategic. He knows what and who you no longer need to carry into your next season. Because the truth is, not everyone can handle the healed version of you. Some only knew you when you were broken, when you doubted yourself, when you stayed quiet to keep the peace. They were comfortable with the version of you who accepted less, who dimmed your light just to make others feel brighter. But that version no longer exists. You've outgrown it. Now, you've started protecting your peace. You've started honoring your value. And that shift makes some people uncomfortable. Let them feel it. Let them react. Let them walk away if they must. But don't you dare feel guilty for growing. Don't you shrink for choosing peace. Don't you apologize for choosing obedience over acceptance. This isn't about being better than anyone. It's about walking in a season where your calling finally matters more than your comfort. A season where your destiny can no longer wait. This is a season where distractions can't afford to stay. A season where you start realizing that proximity does not equal purpose. Just because someone is close doesn't mean they're called to walk where you're going. God is calling you to a higher place. And with higher calling comes a narrower path. It demands more focus, more discipline, more intentional silence. And yes, more separation. Because when God begins to whisper, you can't hear him through the noise of opinions, expectations, and emotional clutter. If you want clarity, you have to start turning down the volume on everything else. You gotta disconnect from people who keep pulling your heart away from his presence. You gotta step out of environments that slowly suffocate your spirit. You've got to leave behind what no longer aligns with the future God is preparing for you. This isn't the time to doubt your growth. This is the time to embrace it fully. Lean into it. Trust that even when it feels like you're losing something or someone, it's really God loving you too much to let you stay stuck. Because here's the truth. Real growth always demands a sacrifice. But what you gain in return, peace like a river, clarity that cuts through confusion, a walk with God that is unshaken, unwavering, and unbothered. And sometimes, the most dangerous relationships aren't the obvious ones, the ones that argue, accuse, or betray. No, the most dangerous are the subtle ones, the quiet drains, the steady leaks, the connections that don't explode, they just slowly empty you. You know the ones. The people who constantly take from your spirit but never give back. The ones who expect your support through every storm but vanish the moment your sky grows dark. The ones who are always receiving but never offering. And at some point, you've got to stop labeling that as love. Because let's be honest, there's a kind of tired that no amount of sleep will fix. It's not your body that's worn down. It's your soul. This weariness you're feeling, it's not just physical. It's spiritual. It's the heaviness that comes from always being the strong one, the dependable one, the one who carries everyone else's burdens while silently drowning in your own. It's the ache of holding together relationships that only survive because you keep doing the work over and over again. You keep telling yourself, maybe this time they'll show up. Maybe if I just give more, love more, try a little harder, but deep down, you're pouring from a cup that's been empty for a long time. And that, my friend, isn't love. That's self-neglect. That's what happens when you confuse loyalty with sacrifice. Some people aren't connected to your soul. They're attached to your service. They don't cherish you. They cherish your availability, your support, your generosity. But what happens when the tables turn? When your heart is breaking and your strength is running low? Suddenly, there's silence. Suddenly, the excuses come. And when you're climbing out of your own storm, they're nowhere to be found. Let's be honest. Those kinds of one-sided connections, that's not sacred. That's not love. That's manipulation in disguise. Even Jesus, full of compassion and power, didn't heal everyone he passed. He didn't chase after every crowd. He didn't exhaust himself proving his worth to those who doubted. He loved deeply, but he also stepped away. He served with strength, but he also rested with intention. And you need to learn to do the same. Because here's a truth that's hard to swallow. You can't carry people who refuse to walk. You can't rescue someone who keeps jumping back into the same fire. And you absolutely cannot lose your peace just to hold together a relationship that only exists through your suffering. Sometimes the most loving, God-honoring thing you can do is step back. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of wisdom. Your peace is far too valuable to keep renting it out to people who treat it like it's disposable. You tried everything. Talking, serving, praying, holding on, showing up, but nothing changes. And maybe, just maybe, the reason you keep feeling this tug in your heart is because God is trying to teach you a deeper truth. Not everyone is meant to stay. Not everyone is assigned to your forever. Some people were only there for a lesson, a season, a moment of growth. And when the purpose of that connection is fulfilled, it's time to release it. Yes, it's painful. I know you've got a heart that loves deeply. You want to believe the best in people. You hold on because you care, because you hope, because you see potential. But hear this, faith is not the same as foolishness. And love doesn't mean losing yourself in the process. Boundaries aren't bitterness. They're wisdom. Boundaries define where you end and someone else begins. They're not walls to keep people out. They're fences to protect what's sacred within. Your purpose, your peace, your anointing. And if someone consistently disregards those boundaries, that's not a misunderstanding. That's a choice. They're comfortable watching you stay uncomfortable. You weren't put on this earth to be someone's emotional dumping ground. You weren't created to endlessly fix broken people who have no interest in healing. At some point, God will ask you to put that weight down, to stop over-explaining, to stop rushing in to rescue people who wouldn't even throw you a rope if you were drowning. And when that moment comes, don't let guilt chain you in place. Don't let history become your prison. You can love someone deeply and still choose to walk away. You can forgive someone sincerely and still say, this chapter has ended. Because peace isn't just about avoiding drama. It's about living in alignment with your values, your faith, your calling. If someone keeps pulling you away from that alignment, that's not loyalty. That's sabotage. So protect your spirit. Guard your energy. Stop giving space in your life to people who constantly leave behind damage. You are not their savior. You were never meant to carry their healing on your back. And you don't need to burn yourself out to prove that you're worthy of love. Because the right people, the ones God sends, they won't need endless explanations. They'll recognize your worth without question and honor it without hesitation. The right people won't deplete you. They won't treat your presence like a lifeline they can cling to when life gets rough. Instead, they'll walk beside you, shoulder to shoulder, not just when you're giving, fixing, or carrying, but when you're still, healing, or simply being. If someone only sticks around because of what you offer, then their silence the moment you stop pouring is all the confirmation you need. That moment of distance, that's not rejection, it's revelation. And when you finally realize that their absence brings you more peace than their presence ever did, it becomes clear you didn't lose a friend, you let go of a burden. So release those who only reach out when it benefits them. Let them slip away, not with resentment, but with resolve. Bless them quietly, release them firmly. Because when you stop pouring your energy into people who never grow, you create space for what God actually wants to bloom in your life. Eventually, you'll reach a season when silence is no longer a sign of weakness. It's a marker of wisdom. A time when your distance says more than any long explanation ever could. When you've moved past the noise and stepped out of the games, you understand that peace doesn't arrive by accident. It's something you build, something you guard with deep intention. And one of the most powerful ways to protect that peace, stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided what they think about you. Some aren't looking for clarity, they're seeking control. They don't ask questions to understand. They ask to trap you. They don't listen to your truth. They listen to weaponize your words. Every time you go back, try to explain your heart, your silence, your decisions, they twist it. They use it. And then you're left drained, anxious, wondering why nothing feels right, why you feel so off-center. But maybe it's not you. Maybe it's because you're still playing a role in a story God never wrote for you. There's a quiet power in choosing to leave, silently, purposefully, without a dramatic exit. Not out of ego, not out of bitterness, but out of spiritual self-respect. Because your peace is worth protecting. You walk away, not out of anger, but because your spirit simply can't stay where dishonor lingers, where your worth is questioned, where your name is dragged through the mud. You stop showing up, not to prove a point or punish anyone, but to protect your peace. Because God never called you to beg for recognition. He never asked you to fight just to be respected at a basic level. And He certainly didn't anoint you to remain in places where your presence is merely tolerated, not cherished. There's a profound difference between forgiveness and foolishness. Forgiveness liberates your heart and releases the burden. Foolishness? It keeps you stuck, trapped in toxic patterns, all in the name of misplaced loyalty. Sometimes the only reason they keep poking, keep pressing, keep testing you is because they still have access. They've still got your number, your attention, your energy. And as long as you respond, even with silence laced with frustration, they think they still hold influence over you. But when you stop engaging, when you quietly pull back, when your distance becomes your decision, that's when the truth hits them. They never had real power. They only had proximity. You don't owe the world an explanation. You don't have to broadcast a statement. You don't need to gather your circle to tell your side of the story. Sometimes the most spiritual and courageous thing you can do is remain silent. Let them speculate. Let them misjudge. Let them hold on to their own version of the story. Because truth doesn't always need a defense. It reveals itself in time. And maybe you're thinking, but I don't want to be misunderstood. I hear you. I truly do. That desire to be seen clearly. It's real. It's human. But here's something to remember. Even Jesus was misunderstood. He was falsely accused, mocked, misinterpreted by the very people he came to save. And yet, he stayed focused on the mission. He didn't chase rumors. He didn't gather his disciples to issue a statement and set the record straight. He kept walking. Not because he wasn't hurt, not because he didn't care, but because he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The only voice that mattered was his Father's. That same truth is what you need to hold on to when your character is being questioned, when your silence is misunderstood, when people accuse you of changing. You know what? Let them say it, because you have changed. And thank God for that. Thank God you no longer react the way you used to. Thank God you're no longer dependent on external validation to feel whole. That shift, that's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's growth. That's what spiritual maturity looks like. When you walk closely with God, your steps won't always make sense to everyone around you. And honestly, they're not supposed to. Your calling wasn't a group chat. It wasn't a public poll. It was a sacred, private moment between you and your Creator. So stop trying to bring everyone into the hidden work God is doing within you. Let them whisper. Let them speculate. You don't need to chase down every false narrative. You don't need to exhaust yourself setting the record straight. Just stay aligned with the path God put before you. And when the timing is right, when the noise fades and the dust settles, the very people who once mocked your silence will be left speechless by your fruit. Because fruit doesn't argue. It doesn't justify. It just grows. Quietly. Powerfully. Undeniably. And the kind of growth God is producing in you will be heard loudest by those who are truly listening. So stay rooted. Stay focused. Keep becoming. Yes, they might say you ghosted them. They might complain you vanished without notice. Let them. Because sometimes leaving the wrong environment is the only way you'll arrive in the right one. Sometimes God removes you from the noise so he can pour truth into your spirit. And you can't hold on to new wine while clinging to old wineskins. That means you've got to believe, deep down, that your silence isn't emptiness. It's preparation. It's restoration. It's God refilling what's been poured out, rebuilding your resilience, sharpening your vision, and reminding you of a non-negotiable truth. Your peace is sacred. So stop explaining. Stop defending. Stop handing over what God gave you as protection. Let your stillness speak for itself. Let your distance deliver the message. And trust this, if he knows your heart, he'll also guard your future. Some of the most powerful transformations don't happen under bright lights. They happen in quiet corners, behind closed doors, far away from the noise. They happen when you finally choose to pull away from the chaos and fix your eyes on the one who's always been by your side. That's when the healing truly begins. Not in noise, not in conflict, but in stillness. That's when restoration quietly takes root. And that's when it finally hits you. Some people had to walk away so you could return to where you belong, back to God. You see, sometimes God allows the wrong people to exit, not as punishment, but as preparation. Not because he ever left you, but because their voices had grown louder than his. All along, he was still speaking. But in the chaos, in the need for validation, in the ache for connection, his whispers were drowned out. You kept searching for comfort in conversations that drained you, kept pouring your heart into relationships that gave nothing back. And all the while, God was gently calling, "Come back to me." Because here's the truth. You can't hear divine direction when your spirit is entangled in distraction. You can't receive heavenly guidance when your peace depends on human presence. When your sense of worth rises and falls based on who texts, who notices, who stays, it's no wonder your spirit feels stretched thin. But when you finally step away from what's unhealthy, what's inconsistent, what bears no fruit, something shifts. You create space. And in that sacred space, God's voice, once faint through the noise, becomes unmistakably clear. It's in that stillness where clarity returns. It's in that distance where discernment sharpens. And it's in that quiet surrender where transformation begins. Sometimes the most spiritual decision you'll ever make isn't loud, dramatic, or visible. It's choosing to get quiet, to get alone, not lonely, but alone with your Creator. And there's a big difference between those two. Because when you're alone with God, you're never truly alone. You're being wrapped in the presence of the one who shaped your soul. The one who isn't confused by your silence, isn't offended by your boundaries, and isn't scared away by your scars. That's where healing begins. Not just on the surface, but deep within. That's where you remember who you are, and more importantly, whose you are. Not just healing from what people did to you, but from what you started believing because of what they did. That subtle, lingering belief that maybe you're too much, or maybe not enough. That love always has to come with pain. That being constantly needed somehow means you're deeply valued. But as you press deeper into God's presence, those lies start to unravel. Their grip weakens. Their power fades. There's something sacred about the wilderness season. It's that in-between place where everything familiar falls away. Every distraction, every false attachment, every toxic tie that once felt essential. It's uncomfortable, even painful, but it's also essential. Because in the wilderness, God strips away the noise and begins to reshape your identity. Not based on who abandoned you, what failed, or how others treated you, but solely on who He declares you to be. Healing isn't just about moving forward. It's about moving deeper, deeper into truth, deeper into grace, deeper into a kind of love that doesn't demand performance, doesn't recoil at your brokenness, and doesn't walk away when things get messy. That kind of love doesn't originate from people. It flows only from God. And when you finally anchor your worth in Him, you stop chasing it in them. You stop waiting for that text that never comes. You stop checking your phone to see if they notice your absence. Because something shifts inside you. Their silence no longer echoes louder than His presence. And that shift, that's everything. God never needed your life to be packed with people. He needed it to be filled with Him. And sometimes, out of His mercy, He'll lead you into a season of isolation. Not to punish you, but to purify you. To remove what's been clouding your vision. To teach you how to stand, not just emotionally, but spiritually strong. To remind you that your strength doesn't come from applause, attention, or validation. It comes from the one who created you. And once you've been refined in that fire, once you've endured that kind of sacred solitude, something unshakable takes root. You no longer seek approval like oxygen. You're no longer desperate to be seen. You're grounded. You're becoming whole. You're no longer starving for affection. You're not chasing validation or begging for attention. You've arrived at a place of stillness. Not because everything around you is perfect, but because you have changed. You've discovered a peace that doesn't rely on people to feel secure. A peace that isn't fragile. A peace that remains steady even in the middle of life's storms. It's the kind of peace that surpasses all understanding. And once you've tasted it, you stop settling for anything less. Some people will look at you and say you've changed. And they're right, you have. But they have no idea what it cost you to find your way back. Back to your true self. Back to your calling. Back to God. They didn't see the nights when tears soaked your pillow. They didn't hear the quiet prayers you whispered when you felt like giving up. They didn't witness the strength it took just to hold on when everything in you wanted to let go. And that's okay. They don't need to understand. Not everyone will witness the process, but they will see the fruit. And the fruit never lies. You may have walked away from certain people or places, but what matters most is that you walked straight into the embrace of grace. And in that embrace, you found what no human relationship could ever fully offer: identity, clarity, stability, and a deeper sense of purpose. Now, you're no longer loving from a place of need. You're loving from abundance. You're not giving to be accepted. You're giving because you're already secure. You're no longer showing up empty. You're showing up filled because your source is no longer people. Your source is God. So if you've been wondering whether it was worth it, stepping back, going silent, pulling away from the noise so you could return to the presence of God, let me tell you clearly, yes. Yes, it was worth it. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it felt lonely. Yes, there were moments you thought everything was falling apart. But sometimes things have to fall apart, not to break you, but to finally bring your soul into alignment, to bring it back home. And that's a kind of restoration no one can take from you. Wishing you strength, peace, and unshakable joy on your journey. Stay true to your path. And if this message has spoken to your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mindset Daily. Wishing you health, happiness, and the courage to keep going.